Lesson 2, Cohesion. Now, in Lesson 1, we already explained to say in discourse analysis is divided into two major parts. That is cohesion and coherence, and these are the two things that we are going to try and look at. We are going to try and look at what links the two, what links cohesion to coherence, and what is the relevance of cohesion and coherence in discourse analysis. Okay, so in Lesson 2, we are going to look at cohesion. Now, cohesion is the grammatical relationship between different elements of a text. We're talking about the relationship between one text and another. That is what cohesion is. Okay, we say it is the linguistic feature which links sentences together. Now, in other words, we'll say cohesion is somewhat of a glue. The thing that glues one sentence to another. Kind of like the way a sandwich works. You have one slice of bread on one hand, another slice of bread on the other. What links the two, what connects the two is what you're going to put in the middle of the bread to make a sandwich. And that is what cohesion is. What the thing that we use to put together two different sentences, to connect together or to link together two different sentences or two different words. That is what cohesion is. We say cohesion is the glue that holds a piece of writing together. In other words, if we look at paper, for instance, if paper is cohesive, then it sticks together from sentence to sentence and from paragraph to paragraph. Cohesive devices, and we will get to look at cohesive devices in this same lesson far much ahead. So cohesive devices will include so many different words or phrases or even tactics. Okay, or even tactics that show a relationship between two sentences. And one simplest example of cohesion would be the way we use conjunction words. The way we use simple words like neither, or, and. Those are the simplest examples of cohesion you would find. So let's take a look at the example that has been shown there. What you see underlined, all those are cohesive devices. All that is one example of, those are various examples of cohesion. Okay, my father once bought a Lincoln convertible. Already bought shows a relationship between the father and the Lincoln convertible. What does the Lincoln convertible have to do with this person's father? It was bought. The Lincoln convertible was bought by this person's father. So that already shows some sort of a relationship between these two different sentences, okay, or words, or phrases rather. And the examples goes on. We would see could, he did it, did what, bought. Already did it is already showing there's already a relationship between did it and bought, because it's taking us back to what do you call this pronouns? It's a substitute. It's already taking us back to the earlier word, which was bought. We don't want to repeat words. We don't want to use repetition. So what do? We just said he did it. That is substitution. That is again another example of cohesion. Now, as we move on, as we move further, we'll get to look at the cohesive devices. What really is cohesion? Okay, or what is the constituent of cohesion? What is contained in cohesion? Or what, cohesive devices are these different devices or methods rather of expression of words in a text or in an utterance that connects related ideas, and that is the fundamental. That is now the fundamental of cohesion. Cohesive devices, we say these are methods Okay, these are methods, they're expressions of words. In simple terms, they are words. Okay, they are words in a text or in an utterance that will connect related ideas that are related. We want to make a connection between idea number 1 and idea number 2. That connection is what shows us to say, oh, we are talking about the same thing. Okay, it is what makes a text cohesive. What makes a text cohesive are the relationships that hold between the words. Okay, the father naturally has nothing to do with a Lincoln convertible. The father has nothing to do with the car. Okay, but the example shows us to say that word bought is what in turn gave us the relationship between phrase number 1 and phrase number 2, the word bought. Okay, that already is another cohesive device. Perhaps before we even move on to the cohesive devices, let's take a look at this diagram here. This diagram shows the constituents of a text. Perhaps we have already gone through what a text is. By now, we already understand what a text is. Okay. If we were to go back in lesson 1, we remember to say number 1, another term we use for discourse is text. So in this instance, text and discourse are one and the same. So in a text, in a piece of discourse, what is contained? That is what the diagram is showing us here. It's showing us the constituents of a text. What is contained in a text? What is contained in a piece of discourse? Number 1, we have what we call texture. Texture, this is what we call the linguistic feature that is present in a passage. Texture is the linguistic feature that is present in a passage. Okay, that is what texture is. Then ties. Ties, obviously, tie. Even from the word itself, tie. What is it? It is a glue. Okay, this is what glues the individual text together to make a whole. So in a text, we have number 1, the texture. This is the linguistic feature that is in a passage. Okay, this is maybe in a sandwich would say this is probably the bread. Okay, while the tie becomes what we put on the sandwich, maybe let's say cheese or butter, for instance. Okay, so we have the texture, which is the bread, and then we have the butter, which in this case is the tie. The tie, this is tie, is what ties or glues the individual text to make a whole. That is what a tie is. That is what we have in a text. So other than texture, we also have ties. Okay, and from the ties, we have what we call now cohesion. Okay, so we have bread and we have the constituents of a sandwich. We have texture, right? Then we have the ties. We have texture, which is the bread. Okay, then we have ties, which would be what we put in the middle of the sandwich. Okay, be it butter, honey, jam, anything. Okay, so we glue the two textures together. We glue texture 1 and texture 2 together. We glue bread 1 and bread 2 together using what? The butter. So when the two are glued together, then that is when our cohesion comes in. Because now we have glued A and B together. So now there's a relationship between sentence A and sentence B. Let's move on to cohesive devices. We already explained what cohesive devices are. Now, human beings use language to communicate with each other, obviously, and to represent their ideas and their thoughts. Human beings use language to express themselves, so to say. Okay, so communication could be either written or spoken. And in lesson 1, we mentioned to say discourse is not just written. So even when we look at discourse and when we look at analyzing text, we're just saying text, but then it could be spoken, it could be written discourse. That is now the stretch of languages you've seen in the brackets there. Okay. So to all this, through this communication, through trying to express oneself, okay, what do we use? We use words. Okay, we use words, and more words, and then we turn these words into sentences, the sentences into paragraphs, and paragraphs into a whole chapter, so to say. That, okay, is what communication is all about. We use words in order for us to communicate, and we use communication for expression. Okay, now a wide range of sentences can be used as a unified whole, okay, or we can separate unrelated sentences, and all that is due to cohesion, okay, in a way where you produce words. These words will be glued together. They'll be glued together and they'll be turned into what? Sentences. And the sentences, when glued together now, when we make a connection between sentence 1, sentence 2, it gives us a paragraph. Okay. All these simple glues, all these things that make us relate to a text, that make us give a relationship between sentence 1 and sentence 2, between paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. That is what cohesion is, and cohesive devices are what we use to make these connections. Okay, what then are cohesive devices? Okay, now a cohesive device is a device which holds different parts of a thing together. We've been talking about gluing. I'm sure by now we're already even tired of hearing the word glue, but basically that is what cohesion is. Cohesion is the act of gluing two different sentences, while cohesive devices are what we use now to glue together. It's like we have the act of gluing two different parts together. We have the act of gluing two different parts together. That is cohesion. Okay? Then cohesive devices like the actual glue now that we get to use as we are doing our gluing. Okay? Cohesive devices, these are single words. They could be single words. They could be phrases that hold and hang different parts of a text. Okay. We could basically call them tools of cohesion, devices of cohesion. Okay. And the major function is text formation. Obviously, the reason why we are gluing word A and word B is so that we are able to do what? To form a text, to form a unified idea. Okay? Or to create unity within the text. And as we already know, a text must be meaningful. It should be for a text to make sense, for a text to be semantic. Okay, it must be meaningful. A text that is not cohesive is not meaningful. And these cohesive devices show a logical relationship between sentences and paragraphs. Imagine reading a book. The first paragraph is the first chapter. Sorry, the first chapter is talking about, maybe the theme in there sounds like it is love. And then when you go to the second chapter, you absolutely shift and then you start talking about war. There is no connection between paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. And in that case, we say it is anti-semantic. It is not cohesive. We say, no, this book is not cohesive. It is not cohesive because we cannot make a connection between paragraphs or between sentences or between words. Let's quickly jump to some examples. Mary will jump if she's fit. Mary will jump if she is fit. Now, both say Mary will jump. that's a sentence. It's a complete sentence. Mary will jump. But imagine if we removed the first part, Mary will jump, and then someone just comes and says, if she is fit. If she is fit. Obviously, we're going to wonder if who is fit. If you are going to ask such a question, then we're going to say the text is the sentence is not cohesive because it is not giving us a complete meaning. Okay, so Mary will jump if she is fit. Already the she now shows a relationship between between the first sentence, the first part of the sentence, and the second part of the sentence. We are talking about the same person. Okay, we are saying if she's fit, she will jump. Who is she? Mary. By virtue of us answering the second part of the sentence using the first part of the sentence, that already shows a relationship. Another one would be the company will change its policy. Its policy. Which policy? The company's policy. Okay. Aisha wants to know if her proposal was accepted. Her proposal. Whose proposal? Aisha's proposal. Okay. Now, cohesive devices may take a number of forms. We're talking about pronouns. We're talking about nouns, conjunctions. Sometimes, as we move on, surprisingly, you will discover that sometimes even skipping a sentence is also some sort of cohesion. We'll move on to the types of cohesion, to the types of cohesive devices. Okay. Now, sentences would say sentences are presented as a whole, and are linked and related to each other by means of specific cohesive devices. We have, in total, in the English language, we have 5 cohesive devices. We have reference, substitution, ellipsis, conjunctions, and lexical items, which we will refer to as lexical cohesion. So cohesive device number 1, reference. Reference is the relationship that a linguistic expression has with another. This one is often characterized by the replacement of a noun with a pronoun, like the previous examples that we looked at. She, her, that is what reference is. So when in the first part of the sentence, we mention a name, we mention a noun, in the second part of the sentence, we go ahead and decide to skip over mentioning the name, so we decide to use a pronoun instead. So by virtue of us replacing the noun with the pronoun, that is what we refer to as reference. When you are referring to something, you are pointing back to something, and we will look at all these in detail. Substitution, we say this is a relation where one item within a text is replaced by another. We are simply substituting one item with another. Then ellipsis is what we say the omission of a word, but still maintaining its meaning. Now, this one is the most interesting, and we will look at it in detail later on. With conjunctions, obviously, the same conjunctions that we use, the same conjunctions that we looked at in writing skills in our preliminary courses in English language is the same. It still stands. Conjunctions. Conjunction, a word used to connect clauses or sentences to coordinate two different words or to coordinate 2 different sentences. And all, if, but, all those are conjunction words. And here we are not looking at conjunction as a part of speech, but we are looking at it as a cohesive device. Now, lexical cohesion, we say these are the chains of related words that will in turn show continuity in a lexical meaning, show continuity in a text. That is what lexical cohesion is. Now, this 30-minute lesson was just serving as an introduction to cohesion and cohesive devices. So now that we know what cohesion is and what cohesive devices are and what they mean to discourse analysis, and we'll start now looking at individually, we'll start looking at the types of cohesion, the types of cohesive devices, or the different types of cohesive devices that we have in the English language. So we'll look at these 5 as separate lessons, one by one, so that we get a complete feel of what these are and what role they play in discourse analysis and in discourse analysis, and in turn in the entire study of the English language. So thank you very much for your time, and in anticipation for the next lesson, please try and search the internet on the cohesive devices, see what you can learn from it. Until next time.